Welcome to Incentives Matter, your guide to what's new in behavioral science and behavioral economics. Let's see what's really driving decisions.
Digital self-control tools, the apps and settings designed to keep us off our phones or focused, they're supposed to be our allies in the battle against distraction. But the surprising finding from this new work is how often these digital nudges, they fail. Or more accurately, users just stop engaging with them.
Exactly. It's a classic problem in behavioral design. You create a brilliant intervention, it works initially, but then people adapt. They find workarounds or they just ignore it. The set it and forget it model for digital self-control seems to have a built-in expiration date.
So the immediate thought is to make the nudges stricter or more intrusive. But what this paper suggests is almost the opposite. The solution might be to nudge the nudges themselves.
That's the fascinating twist. Instead of the system getting smarter about how to control you, it's about getting you to re-engage with the system, to reevaluate and adjust your own controls. It's like a meta-nudge, prompting users to become their own behavioral designers.
And that's where the idea of nudge reconfiguration prompts come in, isn't it? Because the core challenge for these tools isn't necessarily that the original nudge was bad, but that it became irrelevant or ignored.
Precisely. Think of a common scenario. Someone sets a 30-minute daily limit on a social media app. For a week, it works. But then their work schedule changes or they're going through a period where they genuinely need to be more connected. The static limit becomes a barrier rather than a help. Or, more subtly, they just get used to dismissing the notification. The prompt ceases to be an effective signal. So the tool itself needs to evolve with the user's changing needs. But critically, it's the user who drives that evolution, not the app automatically adjusting. That's the hypothesis this study explores. The researchers posited that if they could prompt users to actively reflect on their existing self-control settings and choose to modify them, it could restore engagement and the overall effectiveness of the tool. It's moving from a passive receipt of a nudge to an active participation in its design.
And what do these nudge reconfiguration prompts actually look like? Are they just pop-ups asking, do you want to change your settings?
They're more nuanced than that. The study examined different variations, but at their heart, they are interventions designed to draw attention back to the current self-control settings. For instance, an app might display a message like, your screen time limit for this app is currently 30 minutes. Is this still working for you? Tap here to adjust. Or, many users find their limits become less effective over time. Review your current settings. The goal is to trigger metacognition about one's own digital habits and the tools used to manage them. So it's not just a reminder, it's an invitation to act on the reminder, and specifically to reconsider the underlying rule. Exactly. It taps into the principle of agency. Rather than being told what to do by the app, the user is empowered to decide what's best for themselves in that moment. This is a crucial distinction from traditional nudges, which often aim to make a specific choice easier without necessarily requiring conscious deliberation. Here, the deliberation is the point.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when we talk about self-control. It's inherently about an individual's will and conscious effort, even if supported by external tools. Did the study find these prompts were effective in getting users to actually reconfigure their settings?
Yes, the findings were quite compelling. The study demonstrated that these prompts did significantly increase the likelihood that users would engage with their self-control settings. Users who received these prompts were more likely to visit the settings page and, crucially, to make changes. This re-engagement, in turn, led to a renewed effectiveness of the self-control tool.
What kind of changes did users typically make? Were they making settings stricter or loosening them, or was it a mix?
It was a mix, which is actually a positive sign. It suggests users were genuinely reflecting on their needs, rather than just being pushed in one direction. Some users did indeed tighten their limits, recognizing that their previous settings weren't sufficient. Others might have adjusted them to be more flexible, perhaps for specific days or times, which in itself can prevent total abandonment of the tool. The key is that the user owned the change.
That's a critical point for real-world application. If these tools are too rigid, people just uninstall them or find ways around them. But if they allow for personalized, dynamic adjustment, then they're more likely to stick.
Precisely. It turns the self-control tool into more of a dynamic partner rather than a static enforcer. The study also hinted at different types of prompts having varying levels of success, suggesting that the framing of these questions, whether they emphasize potential benefits, current effectiveness, or simply offer a choice, matters significantly.
So beyond just prompting, the design of the prompt itself is another layer of behavioral science at play. Was there any indication of how frequently these prompts should appear? Is there a risk of prompt fatigue where users start ignoring these meta-nudges too?
The paper didn't delve extensively into the optimal frequency, but that's a very valid concern. Just as users adapt to initial nudges, they could theoretically adapt to reconfiguration prompts. The art lies in finding that sweet spot, where the prompt is frequent enough to encourage reflection, but not so frequent that it becomes an annoyance, leading to the same disengagement it's trying to prevent. This is an area ripe for further research, possibly using adaptive algorithms to personalize prompt timing based on individual user behavior and engagement patterns.
What does this imply for app developers or even policymakers thinking about digital well-being? Because often, the push is for platforms to automatically implement safer defaults or stricter limits. This suggests a different path.
It suggests a shift from paternalistic design to empowering user agency. Instead of simply dictating, here's your default setting, good luck, it becomes, here's a tool, and here are opportunities for you to make it truly yours and keep it effective. For developers, it means building in mechanisms for dynamic user input and customization, not just at initial setup, but throughout the product lifecycle. For policymakers, it highlights the potential for interventions that foster digital literacy and self-management, rather than just imposing top-down restrictions.
It's an interesting parallel to other areas of behavioral economics, where giving people choice and control often leads to better outcomes, even if it means they don't always pick the ideal option from an external perspective. The act of choosing itself can be a powerful motivator.
That's right. It reinforces commitment and intrinsic motivation. When users choose to adjust their settings, they're more invested in adhering to them. It moves beyond external constraint to internal commitment. It's the difference between being forced to eat vegetables and deciding for yourself that vegetables are good for you, and then proactively adding them to your diet.
And that intrinsic motivation is what's often missing when people just blindly accept a default or install an app and forget about it. It's the difference between compliance and genuine adoption.
Absolutely. This study suggests that building in these moments of active reflection and choice can be a powerful way to sustain the effectiveness of behavioral interventions, particularly in the digital realm where habits form and shift so rapidly.
So 3 key insights emerge from this for anyone looking to build or use self-control tools. First, static nudges have a limited shelf life. Digital environments demand dynamic interventions.
Second, empowering user agency through nudge reconfiguration prompts can be more effective in the long run than simply imposing stricter controls. It's about co-creation of the nudge rather than passive reception.
And third, the design of these meta-nudges matters. The framing, timing, and choices offered within the prompt itself are critical to ensuring users actually engage in benefit.
The larger question this raises is how far this principle can extend. Could we apply this nudging the nudges concept to other areas, like financial planning tools or health tracking apps, to keep users actively engaged in their long-term goals?
And for those of us using these apps, it might make us ask, are the tools we rely on actually designed to evolve with us, or are they setting us up for eventual disengagement?
That's all for this episode of Incentives Matter. Join us next time as we keep unpacking what really drives decisions. Thanks for listening.
Choose wisely, or at least know why you didn't.